It started slow, almost imperceptible, like water leaking under a door, silent, subtle, and easy to ignore until the damage is done. That's how betrayal works. It doesn't slam into you all at once. It seeps in. My name is Mason. I'm 38, own a small but thriving construction firm, and for the past 6 years, I thought I was married to someone who came home to me because she wanted to, not because it was convenient. Brielle was sharp, poised, and the kind of woman who never let her lipstick smear, even during an argument. A corporate strategist at Hadley Wynn, one of those elite firms where people wore their ambition like a second skin. She always talked fast and walked faster. I used to love that about her. She used to come home exhausted but smiling. Used to. Lately, she came home late, and the smiles had vanished like warmth from winter air. The first time I noticed something off was over dinner. I was talking, probably about a job site or a funny thing one of my guys said, and she wasn't even pretending to listen. Her eyes were locked on her phone, fingers flying over the screen with a half-smirk tugging at her lips. I paused, mid-sentence, and she didn't notice. Just typed and chuckled. That smirk didn't belong to me anymore. And I knew it. I didn't confront her then. What would I even say? Why do your smiles belong to someone else? That sounds desperate. Sad. So I swallowed it. Told myself everyone goes through patches. Told myself love doesn't always look like it used to. But the silence kept growing. The phone buzzed more often. She turned it face down now. She said she had late nights at work, back-to-back strategy meetings with a new client that needed hand-holding. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I've always trusted actions more than words. And Brielle's actions were louder than any excuse she gave. Then came that Thursday. I wasn't supposed to be home early. My site meeting wrapped ahead of schedule, and I figured maybe we could grab dinner. A spontaneous date, just like the old days. Maybe that's what we needed. I parked in our driveway, walked in through the garage, and the house was quiet. Not just quiet, still. I remember setting my keys down and hearing the faint sound of a zipper. That's what made me pause. Our bedroom door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly, and there she was, standing in front of the mirror, slipping into new black lace lingerie. Elegant. Expensive. Not the kind of thing she ever wore for me. She looked over her shoulder and didn't flinch. Didn't scream. Didn't even look surprised. She just said, calmly, "You're not supposed to be home." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat locked. My heart beat so hard I could feel it in my ears. Then came the hammer blow. "It's for Landon," she said, adjusting the strap of her bra with surgical precision. My boss. My world didn't explode. It cracked. Quietly. Like porcelain. Landon Caro. Executive director at Hadley Wynn. I'd met him once. Tall. Fake tan. Smug handshake that lasted half a second too long. He hadn't even looked at me. Like I wasn't part of his world. I remember the way Brielle laughed at one of his lame jokes that night. A little too hard. A little too much. I told myself I was being paranoid. Now it was truth. Dagger sharp and undebatable. I managed to ask, "How long?" She sighed, like I was inconveniencing her. 3 months. Maybe 4. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's what she said about our marriage. She pulled a weekend bag from the closet, already packed. She'd planned this. Every step. She didn't apologize. Didn't cry. Just walked past me like I was a chair or a wall or something that had outlived its purpose. "I'll be at the Hightower Grand," she said, slipping on a coat over her lingerie. "I'll be back Sunday." And then she was gone. I stood there for what felt like hours, in the stillness of a bedroom that now felt like a crime scene. The air reeked of her perfume and my stupidity. But I didn't cry. Not even a tear. Instead, I walked into my home office. Sat down in front of the file cabinet. Pulled out a folder I hadn't looked at in over a year. Security footage, bedroom cam, hidden. It was my brother's idea, actually. He installs home security for a living. Said I should always have a backup, just in case. I thought he was being paranoid, but when we renovated last year, I let him install a hidden camera above the dresser, angled discreetly. I never thought I'd need it. Now I needed it more than anything. I plugged the drive into my computer. The folders were dated. Clean. Efficient. I clicked on a clip from last Saturday, the night she said she was working late. There she was, laughing. Sitting on the bed in the same pajamas she wore when she kissed me goodbye that morning. Except now, she was kissing someone else. Landon. They didn't even close the blinds. They talked. About him leaving Delilah, his wife. About how dumb I was. How he liked that I paid the mortgage and didn't ask questions. My stomach turned, but I watched every second. I needed to see it. To kill the part of me still hoping for a lie. Still hoping this was some weird misunderstanding. It wasn't. When the footage ended, I sat back and stared at the screen. The cursor blinked, waiting for my next move. I could scream, throw something, call her, beg, rage. I did none of that. Instead, I opened a new email. Not to Brielle, to Delilah Caro. And all I wrote was this: you deserve to know. I have proof. Let me know if you want to see it. I hit send. Then I sat in the dark, waiting for morning. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the office, staring at the footage on a loop until the glow of dawn crept through the blinds. It was all there. Brielle, half-draped in smugness and silk, and Landon, lounging in my home like it was his. His hands, his voice, that condescending chuckle as he called me useful. I wanted to punch the screen, but I didn't. I sat still, letting it all harden inside me. I wasn't the man who begged. I wasn't the man who screamed. I was the man who built things, with wood, concrete, patience. And now I would build my own justice, one quiet brick at a time. By noon the next day, I got a reply. Short, cold, direct. When and where? D. Delilah Caro didn't waste words. I sent her a time and a place. A little corner cafe tucked between two art galleries, public enough for safety, private enough for truth. I didn't know what to expect from her. I'd only seen her once, at that gala a year ago where Landon walked around like a god with Brielle orbiting him. Delilah had been next to him then, silent, poised, a statue in heels. I remember wondering if they even liked each other, if that kind of cold was normal in their world. She showed up 10 minutes early, tall, composed, wearing a dark green dress and no smile. She looked like someone who could fire you and make you thank her for it. I stood to greet her. She didn't offer her hand, just nodded and sat across from me like this was a scheduled deposition. Her eyes didn't dart, didn't blink much. Just studied me like I was another problem to assess. I have it all, I said, sliding a flash drive across the table. She didn't touch it. I don't doubt you. That caught me off guard. You knew. I suspected, she said. But he's careful. Smarter than he is faithful. Until now. I watched her for a moment. She was unreadable, but not robotic. There was something in her voice, fatigue maybe, or sadness that had learned how to stand tall. She finally picked up the flash drive and slipped it into her purse like she was pocketing a bullet. It's Brielle, isn't it? She asked. I nodded once. My wife. A pause, then a faint hum of acknowledgement. She didn't gasp or curse or ask why. She didn't call Brielle names. She just took a slow sip of her tea and said, I was right. Right about what? That he'd find someone dumber than him to risk everything for. I couldn't help it. I smirked. Thanks. She looked up sharply. I didn't mean you. Oh, then thank you more. That earned the slightest twitch of a smile. The first crack in the ice. I didn't know what I'd come here expecting. Maybe fury, maybe a dramatic scene, but Delilah didn't flinch. She unfolded a napkin with precision, set it on her lap, and said, So what do you want? I haven't thought that far. Not really. I just knew I couldn't carry it alone. I don't know, I admitted. I thought you deserved to see it. I do, she agreed. But that's not all you want. I hesitated, then said it. I want them to pay. Not just emotionally. Tangibly. I want the two of them to feel it. To lose what they thought was secure. Delilah's gaze held mine. Unshaken. She leaned back in her seat. Then let's burn them down. Together. There it was. Not an offer. A pact. What does that mean exactly? I asked. It means I've lived with this man for 12 years. I know his tells. I know his offshore accounts, his secondary phones, the shell companies he uses to shuffle bonuses and cut corners. I also know the legal team who protected him the last time he did this, with a junior associate named Marley who mysteriously relocated to Seattle after she got too attached. He's a predator in a tailored suit. He thinks silence equals safety. But now, we have a voice. 2 voices. I sat back, absorbing it all. You've been ready for this. No, she corrected. I've been preparing for this. There's a difference. There was something about the way she said it, like she'd been gathering drywood for years, waiting for someone else to bring the match. I looked at her and saw not just a woman scorned, but a strategist, a tactician, a partner. The kind of ally that didn't waste time with vindictive theatrics. She wanted surgical strikes. I've got more footage, I said. Texts, phone logs, even hotel receipts. All booked under my company's name. He's sloppy. She's worse. Delilah nodded. Send everything to this email, she said, sliding a card across the table. Encrypted. I'll match it against what I've got. If we build a timeline, a strong enough dossier, we can approach an attorney. Not for divorce. For leverage. You're planning something bigger. Of course, she said coolly. They want chaos. We give them consequences. We talk logistics. Secure channels. Coordinated moves. But somewhere in the middle of strategy and spite, I noticed something strange, comfort. Not in a romantic sense, not yet, but in the sense that, for the first time since I'd found out, I wasn't alone. Someone else knew what this betrayal felt like. Someone who didn't ask me to move on or be the bigger person. Delilah wasn't interested in pity. She was interested in justice. When we stood to leave, she looked at me, her eyes no longer just calculating. They held something softer. Not quite sympathy, more like understanding. Thank you, she said, for not hiding this. You'd have done the same. I did. The first time. I buried it. This time, no more burying. We walked out together, side by side, not touching but aligned. Like two sides of the same sharp blade. Back at home, the silence felt different. Not heavy, not hollow, just quiet before the storm. I sat at my desk again and sent the files. Every text, every receipt, every clip of their whispered betrayal. I didn't watch them again. I didn't need to. Because now, I wasn't watching alone. Delilah was watching too. The second time I met Delilah Caro, there was no small cafe or cautious distance between us. This time, it was her place, an elegant brownstone nestled in a quieter corner of the city. Not ostentatious like Landon's taste, no sharp glass edges or chrome finishes, but old brick, ivy-lined railings, and the scent of jasmine in the air. I stood on her porch holding a thumb drive, my heartbeat steady and cold. She opened the door before I could knock twice. Right on time, she said, stepping back to let me in. Her voice, still velvet and ice. But this time, something about her expression had softened, like the edges had been sanded down just enough to show the shape underneath. Inside, it was quiet, lamplight rather than overheads, jazz playing low from an unseen speaker. Not cozy, controlled, curated. There were no family photos. No signs Landon had ever really lived here. Just Delilah, framed by an apartment that matched her exact energy, elegant, unbothered, lethal in its stillness. I reviewed everything, she said, gesturing toward the thumb drive as I handed it over. You're thorough. A little too thorough. You even saved the timestamp metadata. I build houses for a living, I replied, following her into what I assumed was her study. Details matter. She sat at a large desk by the window, motioning for me to take the armchair opposite her. They always underestimate us, she said, plugging the drive into her laptop. You, because you don't wear a tie to work. Me, because I smile too politely. I leaned forward. Not anymore, I imagine. Delilah looked up. No, not anymore. On her screen, she pulled up a dossier she had clearly started before I'd even contacted her. It had folders labeled financial diversions, hotel logs, HR violations, whistleblower assets. She clicked Open Communications. Inside were cross-referenced phone logs, texts, even chat app conversations, some captured from a backup she must have extracted from Landon's devices. I hired a forensic specialist, she said casually. Months ago. I knew something was off, but I never had a name. Now I do. Now I have clarity. The calm in her voice made me pause. You're not angry. Not in the way people expect, she said, folding her hands. Anger is loud, messy, predictable, and ineffective. I'm interested in clean endings, Mason. Quiet demolition. The kind they don't see until the dust is already settling. Her words stirred something in me, not admiration, not fear. Recognition. We were speaking the same language now. You said this wasn't the first time, I said carefully. Why stay? She glanced out the window. Because power in our circle is optics. And being Mrs. Caro afforded me control. Until now. Now I want something else. What? Freedom, she said, her gaze landing on mine. And an ending that stings. There was a beat of silence between us. Heavy, full of shared weight. I don't want to just expose them, I said. I want them to understand what they lost. To regret it. To feel irrelevant. Disposable. Delilah tilted her head slightly, a small smile touching her lips for the first time. You don't strike me as a vengeful man, Mason. I wasn't. Not until they decided I was an idiot. That made her chuckle, a short, surprised sound. She looked down, shook her head, then met my eyes again. Okay, she said. Let's go beyond exposure. Let's orchestrate it. Landon and Brielle think they're in control. They think no one's watching. So let's remind them who we are. She reached into a drawer and slid a folder across the desk. Inside were documents. Copies of Landon's financial ties to a few sketchy investments, a questionable bonus allocation to Brielle's department, even an internal email where he approved her last-minute trip to consult on strategy in Chicago. That was the same weekend they'd spent at the Hightower Grand. Hadleywood prides itself on discretion and ethics, she said. They won't want this kind of liability on record. I looked through the pages slowly. And the next step? Delilah leaned back, arms crossed loosely. We leak enough to raise questions. Not the scandal, just the seed of doubt. We present it to HR first, anonymously. They'll start investigating. Then we release the real data to key investors. Let pressure cook him. And Brielle. She tapped the folder. She's already on the internal compliance radar. They just don't know it yet. Once they start connecting the dots, it'll be easy to paint her as complicit. She'll flail, deflect, and you'll get to be the calm one when the truth comes out. I nodded slowly. You've really thought this through. I've lived it, she said. We sat for a long moment, the laptop humming beside us, the jazz still low in the background. I don't know what it was, shared betrayal, mutual resolve, maybe just the absence of lies in the room, but something shifted between us. I saw Delilah not as Landon's wife, not even as my co-conspirator, but as someone standing at the edge of the same cliff I was. Neither of us jumped. We started building a bridge instead. As I stood to leave, she walked me to the door. There's a chance this gets ugly, I said. Brielle's good at spinning stories. Landon's worse. Delilah opened the door. Then let them spin. We'll be ready. The night air was cool against my skin as I stepped outside. Before I walked down the steps, I turned back. Why trust me? I asked. She considered it. Because you didn't scream. You didn't crash into my life with noise. You came with truth. And dignity. That's rare. I nodded, letting the words sink in. You're not what I expected. Delilah smiled, really smiled this time. It changed her face. Neither are you, Mason. And with that, she closed the door behind me. As I walked back to my car, something in my chest loosened, not forgiveness, not yet, but something close. I wasn't unraveling anymore. I was sharpening, focused, ready. They'd written us off as footnotes in their affair. But Delilah and I? We were about to become the headline. We didn't plan for it to happen. At least, I didn't. When Delilah first said, let's burn them down, I thought she meant professionally, strategically, and she did. But sometimes, in the middle of scorched plans and whispered conversations, something grows in the ashes, something neither of us expected or asked for. It began with late nights. We had to be careful. Our plans required precision. Quiet meetings, encrypted file transfers, lawyer consultations under assumed scenarios. We were building a case, airtight and timed just right. Most nights, I'd show up at her brownstone around 9. We'd sit across from each other at her dining table, laptops open, legal pads filled with scribbled timelines and financial notations, always 2 cups of coffee between us. But the work became more than logistics. We talked about our marriages, about the warning signs we'd both ignored. She told me Landon hadn't touched her without calculation in over a year. Told me she used to leave the lights on in their bedroom just so she wouldn't feel completely alone. I told her about how Brielle used to ask about my day, how she'd once brought sandwiches to a construction site just to surprise me. That woman was gone now, replaced with someone who wore secrets better than makeup. One night, we finished reviewing a series of hotel charges. Landon and Brielle's weekend escapades documented down to the minibar charges. Delilah closed her laptop, rubbed her eyes, and let out a long breath. I hate that I got used to it, she said, voice soft but steady. The loneliness. I nodded, not knowing what to say. There was something honest about her right then, stripped of her usual elegance. She wore a navy cardigan over a plain white tee, her hair up, no jewelry. Still beautiful, but human. Accessible. I used to think being strong meant staying, she added. Now I think it just means knowing when to stop bleeding for someone who never tried to stop the cut. I leaned back in my chair. You ever wonder if they were always like this? Or if we just missed it until it was too late? Delilah looked at me for a long second, then said, I think they wore masks. And we loved the masks. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The silence said everything. We sat there, still, the only sound the faint ticking of the wall clock and the hum of her refrigerator. She stood up to refill her cup. You want more coffee? I shook my head. No, I'm good. Thanks. She paused in the kitchen, back still to me. Do you ever feel guilty about not falling apart? That question stuck to my ribs. I did. I had. It felt wrong to be this composed when everything I'd built was falling. But I was past the collapse. I was past guilt. What I felt now was clarity. I feel like I'm finally breathing, I said. She turned around, leaning against the counter. Me too. There was a shift in the air. Subtle but electric. We stared at each other longer than usual, and for the first time since this began, I didn't see her as Landon's wife or my partner in justice. I saw her, the woman beneath the strategy, the survivor beneath the poise. She walked slowly back to the table, then stopped just a few feet from me. Her eyes didn't drop. They held mine, searching for something, and whatever she found must have been enough. Because she kissed me. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't a decision. It was an answer. An instinctual, undeniable answer to a question neither of us had spoken aloud. Her hands rested on my shoulders, mine at her waist. The kiss deepened, slow and steady, like both of us were trying to memorize something we didn't think we deserved anymore. I don't know how long we stood there. Minutes, maybe. Hours and feeling. But when we finally pulled apart, neither of us apologized. She whispered, that wasn't planned. No, I said, breath still uneven, but it didn't feel wrong. We didn't rush into anything that night. There wasn't some dramatic sprint to her bedroom or clothing scattered in a trail. We sat back down, talked more, realigned. Not about revenge. About us. That weekend, I didn't go home. I didn't want to. Brielle had barely acknowledged me in weeks. I doubt she noticed. Delilah and I spent the next day walking through an antique market on the east side. No disguises. No secrecy. We weren't holding hands or kissing in public. We were just two people trying to feel normal for a minute. She stopped at a booth selling old fountain pens, picked one up, and said, Landon used to collect these. But he never wrote anything. I smiled. That fits. She looked at me. You're not like him. Brielle used to say I wasn't ambitious enough. Delilah tilted her head. Maybe you just had the wrong audience. Later that night, as we watched an old film in her living room, her head resting on my shoulder, I realized I hadn't thought about revenge in hours. I hadn't thought about footage or emails or court dates. I thought about her laugh. The way she paused before speaking, always choosing her words like she was laying tiles with care. I thought about how easy it felt to be around her, even in the middle of the storm. After the movie, she turned to me and asked, Do you regret it? No, I said without hesitation. Do you? Delilah shook her head. That was better than my entire marriage. I nodded. Same. We didn't make promises. We didn't define anything. But something had changed. We were no longer just aligned by betrayal. We were drawn together by choice now. Mutual. Earned. And in that quiet house, with everything still waiting to fall apart outside those walls, something inside me had already started to rebuild. Not with bricks this time, but with her. They didn't know we knew. Not yet. That was the part that made it delicious. Brielle and Landon were still moving through the world like they were untouchable. Two high-risers with stolen nights and smug little secrets they mistook for sophistication. But Delilah and I had let the silence stretch just long enough for them to feel safe, comfortable, ready to start flaunting. And that's when we moved. It started with a lunch party. Landon's firm was hosting a quarterly networking event. Corporate casual, catered, carefully curated. These things were more performance than purpose. I'd been to one, years ago. Enough to know that everyone dressed to look effortless while silently comparing watch brands and talking about equity portfolios between sips of Prosecco. Delilah made the decision. I want to watch the life fall apart in real time, she said, slipping on a pair of earrings I hadn't seen before, small emerald studs, subtle but precise. You sure? I asked her that morning. It's going to get loud after this. She smiled. Let it. She wore the necklace that sealed it. Thin gold with a small ruby pendant. I recognized it from the bedroom footage. Landon had given it to Brielle, told her it reminded him of her fire. Now Delilah wore it with a low-cut black dress, soft curls in her hair, and a composure so sharp you could cut paper with it. She didn't ask me to come. This part was hers. I waited outside the event location in my truck. A cafe sat across the street with a clear view of the rooftop patio where the party was held. I ordered black coffee and sat near the window, watching through the glass as the chessboard shifted. Delilah walked in like she belonged there, like she owned the place. I saw Landon spot her almost instantly. He was mid-laugh with a glass of champagne in one hand and a colleague on his arm. His smile froze. His posture stiffened. Then, slowly, he walked over to her, masking his panic with charm. Delilah didn't say much, just leaned in close and whispered something that turned Landon's face from beige to ghost white in under 5 seconds. The way he backed up, hands fluttering at his sides like he couldn't decide whether to reach for her or shield himself from what was coming. That alone was worth every sleepless night I'd had since the betrayal. Then she turned and walked out without a glance back. Across town, Brielle was just getting back from a strategy session at the firm. Delilah had timed it all. Sitting at Brielle's desk when she returned was a plain navy folder. Unlabeled. Unassuming. Inside, screenshots of her texts to Landon. Some flirtatious, some vulgar, all time-stamped. Hotel invoices billed under my business name. Room service orders. Parking validations. Copies of emails between her and Landon authorizing off-site consulting weekends. There was no note. Just evidence. She called me 30 minutes later. I let it ring once before answering. "You did this," she hissed. "You've got the wrong tone for someone caught in high definition," I said calmly. "Mason, please. This was complicated." "No, Brielle," I said. "What's complicated is that you used me as your excuse while sleeping with your boss. What's complicated is that you brought him into our home. What's complicated is that you thought I wouldn't find out." She was breathing hard on the other end. I imagined her sitting there, clutching the folder, desperately rehearsing different narratives in her head. "I'm coming home," she said finally. I didn't even flinch. "Check the guest room. Your things are there now." A pause. "You're serious. Dead serious." Then I hung up. I didn't feel joy. Not yet. What I felt was justice. A small, clean click inside me. Like something locking into place. She showed up that night. Pulled into the driveway like she owned it. I watched from the kitchen as she stepped out of her car, heels clicking up the walkway, hair curled. Makeup still in place but smudged slightly, like the day hadn't gone as she'd planned. She opened the front door without knocking. Of course she did. I didn't say anything at first. Just handed her a key to the guest room. "This is my house too," she said. "No," I said. "It was." Past tense. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. "Mason, you want to explain yourself?" I asked, arms crossed. "You want to say this wasn't real? That Landon manipulated you? That you weren't thinking clearly? Go ahead. I'll wait." She opened her mouth, closed it, then said, "I made a mistake." I nodded slowly. A mistake that happened in multiple hotels over months with planning, effort, and lies. That kind of mistake. Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't understand." "You're right," I said. "I don't understand how the woman I married became the kind of person who could smile in my face while handing her body to another man. I don't understand how I missed it. But I'm learning." She stared at me for a long time, hoping for softness, for the man who used to forgive. But he wasn't here anymore. Eventually, she turned and walked down the hall. That night, I heard her crying in the guest room, but I didn't go to her. I let the sound pass through me like wind through broken windows. Something had shattered, yes, but I wasn't the one left picking up pieces anymore. Later, I texted Delilah. "You were right. They didn't see it coming." She replied instantly, "They never do." Then, "Dinner next week?" I stared at the screen for a moment before typing. Absolutely. What they had was lust with a deadline. What we had now was something else. Something forged in truth, patience, and a shared decision to stop being the ones trampled in silence. And the best part? This was just the beginning. The text started that night, Landon first. He must have gotten wind of what happened at the office. Maybe it was the look on Brielle's face, or maybe Delilah's quiet exit left a mark deeper than words. Whatever it was, he didn't wait long. My phone buzzed around 11:07 p.m., just as I was closing the shop's books for the day. The first message. "You think this makes you a man? Then you'll regret dragging her into this." And the one that made me laugh, really laugh. "Delilah's using you. She always plays the long game. She's not yours." It was a fascinating thing, watching a man unravel over text. The punctuation got sloppier. The grammar slipped. Every message oozed desperation behind its thin veil of arrogance. I didn't respond. Not once. I just scrolled, screen-grabbed everything, and added it to a file I'd already shared with our lawyer, Julian Crest. Julian called them emotional landmines. Said the court would eat them up. Threats, coercion, attempts to manipulate through guilt. Textbook behavior of someone who'd lost control and couldn't accept it. Brielle wasn't much better. She knocked on my office door the next morning, holding a coffee mug like peace offerings still counted. Her eyes were puffy. She hadn't slept much. Good. She hovered in the doorway like she expected me to invite her in. Just want to talk, she said. I leaned back in my chair. About what? You want to explain the difference between betrayal and a career move. She flinched. I made a mistake. But this whole war thing? You don't have to do this. I scoffed. You slept with your boss. In our house. You lied to my face and expected me to carry on like nothing changed. Now that the ground's crumbling, you want a ceasefire. I was confused, she said. You were convenient, I snapped. And you thought I was too blind to notice. Now you're scared because the illusion's gone and the world's looking at who you really are. She blinked quickly, trying not to cry again. But this time, the tears weren't moving me. I miss you, she said finally, almost a whisper. I miss us. I stared at her. You miss the version of me who didn't know better. I'm not that man anymore. That shut her up. She turned and left without another word. By noon, Julian had already drafted the preliminary divorce filing. Delilah, ever efficient, had hers ready 2 hours later. She emailed me with the timestamped receipt attached like it was a business memo, filed. Let me know when yours is in. D. There was something beautiful about the simplicity of it. No drama. No theatrics. Just facts and forward motion. Later that night, I met her for a drink at an upscale rooftop bar, one Landon had brought Brielle to once. I only remembered because she bragged about the view and how a place like that made her feel expensive. I told Delilah about it. She smirked. Funny. That's the same night Landon came home smelling like her perfume. Said it was some promotional assistant. I raised my glass. To recycled lies. To better endings, she corrected, and we clinked. The skyline behind her shimmered in gold and indigo. The city moved beneath us, but up here, it was quiet. Peaceful. No hidden agendas. No fake laughter over dinner tables with people who looked at you like an obligation. Just her and me. Clear-eyed. Unflinching. You know what scares them the most? She asked after a sip of her drink. What? That we didn't collapse. That we didn't scream or chase them. That we stepped back and let them burn in the space they created. I nodded. They're used to power through confusion. We gave them clarity. That's lethal. Delilah leaned forward slightly. You ever feel vindicated? Or is that not the word? No, I said. I feel free. She smiled, eyes warm but focused. That's better. Back at home, Brielle had gone radio silent. The guest room door stayed closed. I heard her moving around sometimes, calling her mother, talking to someone about trying to save her job. But I didn't eavesdrop. I didn't care. Whatever apology tour she was preparing wasn't for me. I wasn't her audience anymore. The next morning, she left a note on the fridge. Scribbled, I'm staying at a friend's for a few days. I'll respect the space. Underneath it, I never stopped loving you. I read it once, then threw it away. Landon's messages, meanwhile, had turned darker, more aggressive. He threatened lawsuits. Said Delilah had no right to his financials. That she was manipulating me. That I was just her rebound. His desperation was showing like a bad poker hand. I sent it all to Julian. This is gold, Julian texted. He's spiraling. Keep documenting everything. The more erratic he gets, the easier it'll be to sink him in court. Delilah didn't seem fazed. Let him dig, she said during one of our strategy calls. He's using his own hands. It was strange how the lines had changed. Me and her. Them and us. Brielle and Landon used to have the upper hand. They had the secrets. The smirks. The confidence of people who believed they were immune to consequences. Now, they were scrambling, fragile, exposed. Meanwhile, Delilah and I had become steel. Not because we were perfect. Not because we had some fairy tale brewing in the background. But because we refused to lie to each other. We were honest. Brutally, consistently honest. That alone made us dangerous. The final piece of the plan was coming into place. Delilah had scheduled a meeting with one of Hadley Wynn's board advisors, someone who'd worked with Landon for years but wasn't blind to his behavior. They'll want a clean break, she told me. They'll want the firm's name out of the mud before investors start pulling. I asked, what happens when he finds out you're the one pulling the thread? She met my gaze. Then he'll finally understand what it's like to be underestimated. We were nearly there, the top of the hill. And when we pushed that last domino, everything would fall. But even now, with everything shifting beneath them, I knew the part that scared them most wasn't court dates or asset division. It was this, that we were fine, that we had each other, and that their chaos was no longer contagious. The courthouse smelled like old paper and cold coffee. It always does. There's something about these places, sterile and humming with nerves, that strips people bare, no matter how expensive their suits are. I sat at the long wooden table beside Julian, our lawyer, hands clasped, jaw still. Across the aisle, Brielle sat next to hers, eyes down, face powdered like that would somehow hide the cracks. And behind her, smiling like he owned oxygen, was Landon Caro. He wore a navy blue suit, gold cufflinks, and that same smug grin I remembered from the gala years ago when he ignored my outstretched hand. He wasn't even pretending to be nervous. To him, this was just another negotiation, another boardroom, a minor fire to be extinguished with influence and checkbooks. He leaned toward Brielle, said something with a crooked smile. She didn't smile back. Delilah sat behind me. Not beside me, not for optics, she said. Let them see us as individuals first. Let them underestimate how united we really were. But I felt her presence like armor. I could smell her perfume, subtle and clean. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew she was watching. Watching them. Watching us. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The silence in that moment was unlike anything else, a thick tension only courtrooms can summon. The kind where everyone's holding their breath, waiting to see who blinks first. What followed was a blur of procedural motions, names, statements, clarifications. Then came the parts that mattered. Brielle's lawyer tried to paint the affair as a temporary emotional lapse, a byproduct of excessive work stress and marital distance. She dabbed at her eyes at all the right moments, nodded solemnly, whispered to her attorney like she'd just remembered something heartbreaking. But I'd seen those same hands wrap around another man's neck while laughing. I'd heard the giggles through speakers in my office. There was no heartbreak, just habit. Then Landon took the stand. He called our claims concocted, said I had malicious intent because I couldn't handle the divorce like a man. He tried to smear Delilah too, labeling her cold, calculated, and always jealous of his success. He even leaned back in the witness box like he was auditioning for a TED Talk. Julian smiled. The kind of smile wolves wear before lunging. When it was our turn, Julian didn't just attack, he dismantled. Piece by piece. Email records. Hidden financial transfers to hotel chains. A copy of Landon's authorization approving Brielle's out-of-town strategy meetings that corresponded with their rendezvous. Then came the screenshots of Landon's late-night threats to me. The judge read each one aloud. Every slur, every half-veiled insult. Landon stopped smiling after the second one. But the dagger? The footage. Julian introduced it calmly. Your Honor, the following was retrieved from a privately owned in-home security system, legally installed and time-stamped. The courtroom went dark as the clip played on the monitor. It wasn't explicit. Delilah made sure we submitted something tactful, but it was damning. Landon and Brielle. In our bed. Kissing. Laughing. Brielle pulling open a drawer and tossing aside one of my t-shirts to make room for hers. Brielle buried her face in her hands. Landon just stared forward, stone-faced now. When the lights came back up, the room felt different. Colder. Quieter. The judge looked down at Landon, then at Brielle, then finally at me. Do you have any other recordings? The judge asked. Julian responded crisply, we do. And we're prepared to submit them in the event of denial or escalation. But we felt this sample was sufficient. Landon's lawyer asked for a recess. The judge denied it. Then Delilah's attorney rose. We'd like to move forward with our separate, concurrent divorce proceeding. Given the overlapping parties, much of the testimony applies here as well. Furthermore, we are submitting evidence of financial misconduct and coercive workplace behavior involving Mr. Caro. The judge raised a brow. Criminal. The lawyer nodded. Potentially. The documents include misuse of company funds, manipulation of subordinate promotions, and internal communications that suggest pressure on female employees to engage in inappropriate conduct in exchange for career advancement. That was the moment Landon's composure broke. He stood. This is insane. She's lying. She always lies. The judge banged the gavel once. Sit down, Mr. Caro. His attorney pulled him down by the sleeve. The rest of the hearing moved like molasses, slow but unavoidable. The judge ordered a freeze on Landon's shared marital assets pending review. Brielle's accounts were also flagged, especially those linked to my business card she'd used without consent. My business lawyer had already calculated the damages. It would all come out in court. When the session recessed, people trickled out in silence. Some of the junior attorneys looked dazed. One of the paralegals whispered something to another and shot a glance at Delilah. She didn't flinch, just stood, gathered her things, and walked out like she'd only been in there to return a library book. Outside on the courthouse steps, I found her by the edge of the building, away from the reporters who had begun to hover. Her arms were folded, hair pinned up neatly, lips a careful shade of war paint red. They didn't expect that, I said, standing beside her. They never do, she replied. They believe silence is immunity. You okay? I will be. We stood like that for a while, letting the noise fall behind us. Then she turned and looked me square in the face. They're going to spin this, she said. Play the victim card. Maybe even sue. Let them try. She gave me a small smile, tired but genuine. It's not over yet. No, I said. But it started. And we're not alone. She nodded, then touched my arm briefly before walking to her car. I watched her drive off, strength in every line of her posture. She didn't look back. I went home alone that night, sat in the living room with a glass of bourbon, staring at the blank television screen. The house was quieter than usual. No sounds from the guest room. No tension coiled behind doors. Just air, empty and still. For the first time in months, I wasn't holding my breath. The war had moved into the open, and we were winning. The headline broke at 9:43 a.m., a Tuesday. Executive Landon Caro under fire for workplace affair and misconduct allegations. It hit like a thunderclap, and I felt it the second I stepped into my office. The team had gone silent. Phones down, side eyes exchanged, whispers traded like black market currency. Julian texted me the article before I even sat down. It was already spreading across LinkedIn and financial forums, the kind of story that starts small but ends up on news tickers and investor calls by lunch. Delilah hadn't called. She didn't need to. This was her strike. A carefully timed release handed to the right outlet, confirmed by a quiet statement from her legal team. Mrs. Caro has cooperated fully with authorities and provided documentation to support internal investigations at Hadley Wynn. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. The article was brutal. It named names, cited the anonymous HR complaints, traced Brielle's promotions to Landon's calendar entries and payment authorizations, included a quote from a source close to the board about the firm's zero-tolerance policy. It even had a screenshot of the necklace, that necklace, highlighting the financial audit that revealed it was charged to a corporate account under client appreciation. The stock dropped 3.4% before noon. Landon tried to spin it, of course. Issued a bland statement through his PR rep calling the claims slanderous and opportunistic. But the damage was done. Investors were spooked. Board members wanted blood. Delilah hadn't just hit him with scandal. She hit his future, his reputation, his network. Everything he built on ego and image was now a liability. I texted her around noon. You hit the vein. She replied a minute later. I used a scalpel. That was Delilah, precision over spectacle. She didn't want chaos. She wanted collapse. Brielle, meanwhile, had gone into full PR mode. By midweek, she'd posted a long-winded statement on her social media account, something about being emotionally misled by a superior, about power dynamics and a journey of healing. She painted herself as the collateral damage of an executive's abuse of influence. But the text didn't lie. The timestamps didn't lie. The hotel bills didn't lie. Her firm issued a public, internal review, notice 2 days later. And by Friday, she was put on administrative leave. I got the news from a mutual friend, well, former friend, who still worked in the same building. She was escorted out quietly. No tears. Just walked like she couldn't feel her own feet. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything left to say. My phone buzzed later that night. Brielle, you're letting them destroy me. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the reply. Then, no, Brielle. You did that all on your own. She didn't text again. Delilah and I met for dinner that weekend. A quiet spot in Midtown, tucked behind an old bookshop. No cameras, no familiar faces. Just two people who'd weathered the storm and now sat in its wake, sharing roasted chicken and wine, not revenge. She looked radiant, not flashy, not curated, just real. Hair loose over her shoulders, light makeup, soft eyes. The tension she wore like armor was gone, replaced by something lighter. Maybe not joy, but peace. So, I said, setting my glass down, you win. She raised a brow. We win. I smiled. How does it feel? She thought about it. Strange. Quieter than I thought. I don't know if I'm supposed to celebrate or mourn. Maybe both. She nodded. I mourned the marriage years ago. I just didn't bury it until now. I studied her across the table. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were something else. Something that chose clarity over chaos. Still scarred, maybe, but whole. You know, she said after a pause, I didn't expect to like you this much. That caught me off guard. I laughed. Wow. High praise. She grinned. You know what I mean. I thought this was going to be a partnership of necessity. Now, I look forward to hearing from you. I reached across the table, resting my hand over hers. Same. She looked down at our hands, then back at me. You think they ever saw this coming? Us. No, I said. They thought we'd be broken. Bitter. Alone. They always do, she whispered. I dropped her off that night at her brownstone. We sat in the car for a minute, headlights off, city alive around us, but far away in that moment. She turned to me. They thought consequences had limits. That names Caro, Mason, were shields. They forgot that sometimes consequences have surnames too, I said. Ours. We didn't kiss. Not that night. It wasn't about passion or victory. It was about grounding. It was about knowing we didn't need fire to be strong. The days that followed were quiet. Landon was officially suspended by Hadley when pending investigation. Word was, the board was already vetting a replacement. His name started disappearing from promotional materials, internal portals, and even the firm's executive directory. The Whisper Network said he'd offered to resign with a compensation package. They said the board laughed. Betrayal, on the other hand, tried to salvage what little was left. I received a formal proposal from her attorney suggesting a compromise on asset division in exchange for keeping proceedings private. I declined. We weren't settling in secret. She'd made her choices in the open. She'd faced the consequences in daylight, too. And Delilah? She'd already filed for sole ownership of the Caro investment portfolio under grounds of fraudulent behavior and breach of marital trust. She had everything documented, every siphoned fund, every shadow account, every manipulated transaction. She didn't just want out. She wanted the part of the empire she helped build, and she'd get it. I watched the world turn on them, not out of spite, but with a strange clarity. You can't build a life on deception and expect the walls not to crack. You can't use people like props and expect applause. They didn't just cheat on us. They gambled with people who knew how to rebuild better. One evening, I stood on my back porch, watching the sun melt into the horizon, and realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was free, and freedom? That was the best consequence of all. The final meeting took place in a sterile conference room with high windows and neutral art. It was the kind of space built to make war feel polite. The settlement session. No courtroom. No judge. Just lawyers, paperwork, and the last remnants of what used to be a marriage stretched thin across polished mahogany. Betrayal sat to my left, but it might as well have been across a chasm. Her hair was pulled back, blazer sharp, lips set in a practice pout, less remorse, more control. She wore the mask well, but I'd already seen what was underneath it. Julian slid a thick folder in front of me and murmured, "This is the final version. You're getting the house, your business assets, and all remaining intellectual property." He leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice. "She's getting very little. Just personal belongings, some savings, and, if she's lucky, a clean break from public embarrassment." I nodded once. I didn't smile. I wasn't here for a trophy. I was here for closure. Across the table, her lawyer cleared his throat and began reading through the terms. Betrayal sat rigid, arms folded, jaw tight. She didn't look at me. She hadn't since we walked in. I caught a glimpse of the engagement ring still on her finger, part of the theatrics, I supposed. Or maybe denial. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. Delilah wasn't here today. Her settlement had already been finalized the day before, swift, decisive. She walked away with her share of the Caro fortune, control of the charitable foundations she'd founded under their joint name, and, most satisfyingly, the public goodwill. Landon had fled the city days ago, reportedly on retreat in the Alps. That's what his PR team called it. I called it running. I object to the inclusion of the business accounts in the marital split, Brielle's lawyer suddenly said. Julian didn't flinch. They were solely under my client's name, built prior to the marriage. Your client made no financial contributions and, in fact, used company funds for personal expenses during the affair, including luxury hotel stays with her superior. There was silence. Brielle shifted, finally speaking, her voice low but cutting. You're trying to ruin me. I turned toward her slowly. You ruined yourself. I'm just drawing the line where it always should have been. She exhaled sharply and looked away, biting the inside of her cheek like she was holding something in. Regret. Maybe. But more likely, resentment. The kind born when control slips through your fingers and lands somewhere you can't reach anymore. The rest of the meeting was methodical. Signatures, document exchanges, acknowledgments. I signed last. Not out of sentiment, just timing. I watched the pen move across the paper and realized my hand didn't even shake. Afterward, as we gathered our things, Brielle stood and faced me fully for the first time. Her voice was quieter now, almost stripped of its edge. Did you ever love me? The question didn't surprise me. What surprised me was how fast my answer came. Yes, I said, but I loved the version of you that loved me back. She blinked. That was all. No tears. Just the smallest recoil, like the truth had touched her skin and left a mark. I walked out without another word. Outside, the sun was high, and the air was crisp. I stood there for a moment, letting it all sink in, not the loss, but the gain. The space that opened when you finally set something heavy down. Delilah met me for dinner that evening. Not a celebratory feast, just a quiet meal. A soft landing. She was already seated when I arrived, dressed in navy, hair swept to the side. She looked up and smiled as I approached. Well? She asked as I sat down. It's done, I said. She walked away with clothes, some cash, and a handful of memories that don't belong to her anymore. Delilah raised her glass. To new chapters. We clinked gently, no fanfare. Conversation flowed easily. We talked about everything but them. Music, books, the smell of rain on pavement. It wasn't an escape. It was a return to something forgotten. Something steady. As the meal ended, we walked outside, the city buzzing around us in soft chaos. She took my hand. No hesitation. Just instinct. You good? She asked, glancing at me sideways. I am, I said. And I meant it. We stood by her car, the breeze brushing her hair across her face. She turned toward me, I searching mine for something unspoken. This isn't revenge anymore, she said. No, I agreed. It's peace. She smiled faintly. So what now? I reached for her hand again. We breathe. We live. We build something that doesn't need to hide in the dark. That night, back at my place, I walked through rooms that no longer whispered her name. The guest room was empty, clean, her scent finally gone. I closed the door gently. It didn't feel like erasing her. It felt like reclaiming myself. In my workshop, I sketched designs for a new expansion, more space, more light. Maybe a loft upstairs. Something open. Delilah had suggested turning it into a studio space, a place for community projects, outreach programs. I like that. At some point, I stepped outside, barefoot on the back porch, staring up at the sky. The stars were faint, the kind you can only see when the city quiets just enough. I thought about the man I'd been 6 months ago, the one who smiled at Brielle across the dinner table, who believed late nights were just busy seasons. That man was gone. Not bitter, not broken, just evolved. And as I stood there, hands in my pockets, cool air brushing against my skin, I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for closure, not for answers, not for an apology that would never come. I already had everything I needed. And tomorrow, Delilah and I had dinner plans. Not to plot, not to process, just to live. And this time, it was enough. Months later, I stood in my workshop, the morning sun pouring through the newly installed skylights. Sawdust floated in golden beams, and the faint hum of power tools filled the background like music. It smelled like cedar, paint, and fresh beginnings. 2 new hires were unloading boxes of supplies in the back, tape measures, wood sealant, high-grade hinges. I watched them for a moment, The ease of their movements, the quiet confidence of young men eager to build. I remembered being that guy once. Except now, I wasn't just another pair of calloused hands. I was the owner, the boss. And for the first time in my life, I actually felt it. Not because of the money, not because of the control, but because of the peace. I wiped my hands on a rag and stepped outside for some air. The street was quiet, save for the occasional hum of a car passing. Across the way, a cafe had just opened its patio seating. Someone laughed, loud, carefree. And for a moment, I closed my eyes and let it all settle in. This life, this version of it. No secrets humming in the background. No late-night texts that weren't meant for me. No rehearsed smiles over cold dinners. Just clarity. Delilah pulled up about 10 minutes later, the hum of her engine breaking gently into the calm. She stepped out wearing black jeans and a soft gray sweater, sunglasses perched on her head, and a takeout bag swinging from her hand. "I brought lunch," she said, smiling like it wasn't the best part of my day. "Smells like chicken shawarma," I said, already walking toward her. She grinned. "With extra garlic sauce. Don't say I never do anything for you." We sat at the small table just outside the workshop's side entrance, unwrapping sandwiches and sipping iced teas. It had become our thing, weekday lunches, no agenda, just time carved out of the noise. "I saw a new article this morning," she said between bites. "Apparently Landon is exploring wellness opportunities abroad." I chuckled. "Is that code for no one will hire him so he's hiding in Thailand with his bruised ego?" "More or less." She took a sip from her drink. "Funny how they thought Scandal would pass like a season." I leaned back in my chair. "They thought we'd fall apart. They thought their damage wouldn't echo." I nodded, letting her words hang there. "Truth is, we never really celebrated. Not in the grand way people might expect. No champagne. No Instagram captions. No smugness. Just small, real moments. Like this. Like the way she'd reach for my hand without thinking, or how she'd ask how my sleep had been and actually wait for the answer. They didn't just lose us," I said. "They lost access. To comfort. To our silence. To our loyalty." Delilah looked at me, eyes soft but focused. "You know, karma didn't just hit them." I glanced up. "What do you mean?" She smiled, slow and certain. "It rewarded us too." She was right. I didn't just get out of a toxic marriage. I got my dignity back. My time. My purpose. I stopped compromising myself for someone who saw me as a placeholder, not a partner. Delilah had been my anchor through the unraveling, but she never tried to fill holes. She didn't love me because I was broken. She loved me because I was healing, and because I wanted her to be part of that, not the reason for it. We cleared our lunch trash, and I walked her through the newly renovated wing of the workshop. She touched the fresh paint on the doorframe, peered into the small lounge we were setting up for clients, and smiled. "It feels lived in already," she said. "That's the goal." "And the studio upstairs?" "Framed and drywalled," I said. "Should be ready in 2 weeks. Maybe less if I keep bribing the guys with donuts." She laughed, the sound light and full. "You ever think we'd get here?" I paused. "Not like this. I used to think healing came in huge gestures. Big speeches. Brand new beginnings. Turns out, it's a quiet place. Where you're just allowed to be." She walked to the center of the room and turned in a slow circle. "It's wild, you know? How betrayal teaches you who you are. Not just what you lost, but what you actually deserve. And what you'll never allow again." She looked at me then, serious. "Do you ever miss her? Even for a second?" I considered that. "Honestly, I miss who I thought she was," I said. "But that person never existed. She was the mask, the echo. I don't miss being a version of myself that made excuses for someone else's cruelty." Delilah stepped closer. "That's the real freedom. When you stop mourning the illusion." I reached for her hand, threading my fingers through hers, "and start living the truth." We stood like that, quiet in a room we'd both helped shape. No ghosts, no bitterness, just sunlight and sawdust and something steady. Later, as we sat on the porch finishing our drinks, she leaned against me and asked, "So what's next for you?" I smiled. "More of this. This. Honesty. Quiet mornings. Building things that don't crumble in the dark." She nodded. "I'd like that too." And in that moment, I didn't think about the past. I didn't think about the courtroom, the lies, the fallout. I thought about the warmth on my skin, the weight of her shoulder against mine, the ease in my chest that had once been foreign. Better than before. That's what this was. Not perfect, not flashy, just better, freer, real. And as far as I was concerned, that was the only kind of happy ending I ever needed.